Good morning. I'm Pastor Catherine Bowers at Evansburg United Methodist Church, and welcome to the message for May 17th, 2020. I think the average church member today knows that there's something really good about a life of faith. We have something good. Jesus calls us to a life of love and grace, and that's why people keep coming to church. That's why they contribute. That's why they volunteer. We know that Jesus calls us to a beautiful life, a life living in the confidence of God's care and power, a life devoted to loving God and our neighbor, a life in which we reach out to help others in need and to do justice and to serve in all kinds of ways. What could be better than that? It's not easy what Jesus asks us to do, but it's wonderful. But we don't often tell anybody about it. It's like a big secret that we keep to ourselves. We seem uncomfortable with sharing our faith, even with friends and family members. And we feel like we don't know how to do it. There's a story in the book of Acts that I think can help us. It's about what happened when the Apostle Paul went to Athens. He's going to notice what's going on with the people there in that great city of Athens, and he's going to start a new church, a new community of believers. What happened before he went there was Paul was preaching the gospel in Thessalonica, and there was some trouble there, some fierce opposition. So he went to Berea, and then there was some trouble there, and then he went to Athens. In Athens, Paul got into some conversations with some key people, including a woman named Damaris and a man called Dionysius the Areopagite. Say that 10 times fast. Dionysius the Areopagite. So I want to explain who Dionysius was. First of all, the name Dionysius was very common back then. It would be like the name Jim now. Every other guy seemed to be named Dionysius. The name comes from the name of the god of wine. So if you liked wine, I guess you might name your kid Dionysius. By the way, the name Dennis also comes from that name. So Dionysius was an Areopagite. Areopagite was not his last name, it was his profession. There was a hill there named Areopagus, and that was the place where judicial proceedings took place. And it was a long tradition for the people in Athens, long before Paul got there, hundreds of years. They had been doing this, having judicial proceedings in that place. So it was really kind of Dionysius the judge, a person of status in Athens. And some scholars think he was actually an appeals judge, so even a little higher than just a judge. This tradition of justice is where our judicial system comes from. It was very important. So Dionysius was a person of status in Athens and part of a great tradition, and he's about as Athenian as you can get. We might wonder then, how in the world Paul talked him into becoming a follower of Jesus Christ? When Paul got to Athens, the first thing he did was spend some time looking around, like a tourist, just looking around. He went to the Agora, the market. It was like a big mall with a lot of little stalls and vendors selling things. And the remains of it are still there today. If you ever get a chance to visit, you can see the stone walls where the vendors were. And at this market, you could buy anything you wanted. There were dishes, pottery, works of art, imported goods, cloth, food, and you could buy your idols. You could buy your gods there, from very inexpensive to very expensive figures. They were made of wood, stone, silver, or gold. Any kind of god you need. If you want to protect your home and family, there's a god for that. If you want your business to go well, there's a god for that. If you have someone in your family who's in the military, you can get yourself a god or goddess of war, and so on. The gods were big business. Around the public area, there were also a number of temples to various gods. Of course, the most famous temple in Athens we know about is the Parthenon, the temple to the goddess Athena. But there were many others as well. If there was ever a center of Greek religion, it was Athens, and they were proud of it. So Paul spends some time looking around, and he looks at the idols. The Apostle Paul, the great preacher of the gospel, looking around at idols. What was he doing? What if someone reports him to the bishop? There are going to be a lot of questions about that. Paul was looking at idols. That was something he never would have done before his conversion. Back when Paul was Saul and he was a most devout Jew, you wouldn't get anywhere near idols if you could help it. But Paul was looking around at idols and he was noticing things about them. We're told he was greatly disturbed. It bothered Paul that people were investing so much of their hard-earned money in these gods and idols, in silver and gold. It comes out in his speech that's recorded in Acts, what bothered him so much. It's not just that it's idol worship. It's that people are putting so much faith in these gods that are dead, that are never going to do anything for them. They are just objects, and people are placing their hopes in them. And that disturbed Paul. Paul's purpose for coming to Athens was to preach the gospel. But before he does that, he takes some time to notice what people in Athens care about. So when they bring Paul to the Areopagus to explain himself, Paul begins by explaining what he has noticed in Athens. He has taken the trouble to try and understand the people and to whom he is talking. He starts with some good things. He does not put the people down. He says, Athenians, I see how religious you are in every way. Paul is affirming something about them. And I think he means it. I see that you want to be worshipful, that you want to revere something. Then Paul goes on to tell them something else he's noticed, that they have an altar with an inscription to an unknown God. And Paul tells them, I know who the unknown God is. It's the God who made everything, the living God. Paul explains to them that the living God is not made of stone, silver, or gold. And Paul offers them the gospel. Some scoff and are hostile to it, but some become believers. And these include Damaris and Dionysius the judge. They choose the living God. The church in Athens is born. We have something to offer people, and it's the living God. It's important for us to look around and notice what the world is like, what people care about, what they put their hopes in, what people invest in. Some people are putting their hopes in silver and gold, and they really think that if they get enough money, they will be happy. They really think that money will solve problems. But these gods are dead gods. What would happen in our country, in our world, if we realized that money should not be the bottom line? What would happen? That money is not the answer, the thing to worship, the thing to serve. We have idols too. The passage tells us that in Athens, Paul debated with different people, with the Stoics and the Epicureans. The Epicureans believe in enjoying the pleasures of life, and the Stoics think the best way to live is not to care too much. These are both options you may have tried. Sharing the faith means getting to know people and noticing what's important to them. Can we affirm them? Can we see what is good in people? Can we offer them the living God? Some will scoff, and some will accept the gospel as something good. Some will believe in the living God. That's the way it was then, and that's the way it is now. May God give us the joy and confidence in the gospel, loving other people enough to notice who they are. May we care enough to enter into dialogue with people about values, priorities, and faith. May we care enough to talk with each other about life's dead ends and what we find to be life-giving. May we have the courage to offer to others the living God. Amen.